the Daleks. They're Doctor Who's most iconic enemy and have appeared alongside almost every Doctor. But which Doctor has fought them the most? Today we're going to look back at every Dalek encounter, from full-on Dalek stories to the briefest of cameos, to find the answer. A couple of points before we get going. Firstly, for the purposes of this video, we're only counting TV stories. So no Big Finish, no novels, no comics, etc. We're also only counting stories in which one or more Daleks actually physically appear, so no voice-only examples. Secondly, not every story to feature the Daleks can be classed as a Dalek story. For example, I don't think anyone would thank me if I gave The Wedding of Riversong and the Daleks Master Plan equal footing. We'll therefore be separating Dalek appearances into two categories. Full-on Dalek stories, that is, any story where the Daleks are the main antagonists, and Dalek cameos, so any story where the Daleks appear but are not the main focus. We'll begin by determining which Doctor has the most Dalek stories, i.e. by just counting those in the first category, then expand our remit to the cameos, to determine which Doctor has the most stories in which the Daleks appeared. Stories which are split across multiple episodes will be treated as one story. For example, Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways counts as one Dalek story, not two. We also need to take the vastly differing runtimes of stories into consideration. Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways, for example, amounts to 90 minutes, twice the length of the same season's Dalek. Similarly, classic Who Dalek stories, which are predominantly split across 25-minute instalments, range from 90 minutes to a whopping 300. To this end, we'll conduct a further count which ranks each era's Dalek stories according to their accumulated runtimes. So without further ado, let's do some number crunching. The first Doctor had 5 Dalek stories. The Daleks, the Dalek Invasion of Earth, the Chase, Mission to the Unknown, and the Daleks Master Plan. Taking into account the fact that episode 7 of the Daleks Master Plan, The Feast of Stephen, is completely Dalek light, this amounts to 775 minutes of runtime. The second Doctor had 2 Dalek stories, The Power of the Daleks and The Evil of the Daleks. This amounts to 325 minutes of runtime. The third Doctor had 3 Dalek stories, Day of the Daleks, Planet of the Daleks, and Death to the Daleks. This amounts to 375 minutes of runtime. The fourth Doctor had 2 Dalek stories, Genesis of the Daleks and Destiny of the Daleks. This amounts to 250 minutes of runtime. The fifth Doctor had 1 Dalek story, Resurrection of the Daleks. This amounts to 90 minutes of runtime. The sixth Doctor also had 1 Dalek story, Revelation of the Daleks. This amounts to 90 minutes of runtime. The seventh Doctor also had 1 Dalek story, Remembrance of the Daleks. This amounts to 100 minutes of runtime. The 8th Doctor had no Dalek stories. This amounts to 0 minutes of runtime. The 9th Doctor had 2 Dalek stories, Dalek and Bad Wolf / The Parting of the Ways. This amounts to 135 minutes of runtime. The 10th Doctor had 3 Dalek stories, Doomsday, Daleks in Manhattan / Evolution of the Daleks, and The Stolen Earth / Journey's End. This amounts to 245 minutes of runtime. The 11th Doctor had 2 Dalek stories, Victory of the Daleks and Asylum of the Daleks. This amounts to 95 minutes of runtime. The 12th Doctor also had 2 Dalek stories. Into the Dalek and The Magician's Apprentice / The Witcher's Familiar. This amounts to 135 minutes of runtime. And finally, the 13th Doctor has had 3 Dalek stories. Resolution, Revolution of the Daleks, and Eve of the Daleks. This amounts to 190 minutes of runtime. So to recap, which Doctor has the most Dalek stories? In 5th place, we have the 8th Doctor with no Dalek stories. In 4th place, we have the 5th, 6th and 7th Doctors with 1 Dalek story. In 3rd place, we have the 2nd, 4th, 9th, 11th and 12th Doctors with 2 Dalek stories. In 2nd place, we have the 3rd, 10th and 13th Doctors with 3 Dalek stories. Which does of course mean that in 1st place we have the 1st Doctor with 5 Dalek stories. We'll come back to the runtime ranking in just a moment, but first, onto Dalek cameos. The Daleks cameoed in 1 First Doctor story. In the Space Museum, the Doctor and his companions find a Dalek casing exhibited on the planet Zeros. A Dalek also appears right at the end of the story as a lead into the following week's adventure, The Chase. This brings the total number of Dalek appearances in the First Doctor's era to 6. The Daleks cameoed in 2 Second Doctor stories. At the end of The Wheel in Space, the Doctor begins to play scenes from The Evil of the Daleks to new companion Zoe on the TARDIS monitor. This was to lead into a repeat of Evil beginning the following week. And in part 10 of The War Games, the Doctor gives a presentation on some of the monsters he's faced, including the Daleks, to the Time Lords. This brings the total number of Dalek appearances in the Second Doctor's era to 4. The Daleks cameoed in 1 Third Doctor story. The final part of Frontier in Space transports us to the Ogron planet, where the Daleks are waiting. Part of an admittedly rather loose lead-in to Planet of the Daleks, which began the following week. This brings the total number of Dalek appearances in the Third Doctor's era to 4. The Daleks cameoed in no Fourth Doctor stories. The Daleks cameoed in 1 Fifth Doctor story. In The 5 Doctors, the First Doctor and Susan encounter a Dalek in the Death Zone. This brings the total number of Dalek appearances in the 5th Doctor's era to 2. The Daleks cameoed in no 6th, 7th or 9th Doctor stories. The Daleks cameoed in 1 10th Doctor story. In The Waters of Mars, Adelaide Brooke recounts how a Dalek spared her life during the invasion of 2009. This brings the total number of Dalek appearances in the 10th Doctor's era to 4. There is also the cliffhanger to Army of Ghosts, but I'm not counting that as a separate cameo due to Doomsday already being counted as a Dalek story. The Daleks cameoed in 4 11th Doctor stories. In the Pandorica Opens / The Big Bang, 3 Paradigm Daleks form part of the Alliance gathered to imprison the Doctor. These Daleks are petrified when the TARDIS explodes, but 2 come back to life in 2010. In The Wedding of Riversong, the Doctor raids a dying Dalek Supreme for information about the Silence. In The Day of the Doctor, the Daleks feature prominently in the flashback scenes to the Time War, and one blasts through into Unit's Black Archive. And in The Time of the Doctor, the Daleks are one of a number of races who attempt to breach the force field on Trenzalore. Indeed, the only one to do so successfully. This brings the total number of Dalek appearances in the 11th Doctor's era to 6. The Daleks cameoed in 3 12th Doctor stories. In Hellbent, the Doctor and Clara encounter a Dalek in the cloisters of Gallifrey. In the pilot, the Doctor lures Heather to a Dalek battleground in an attempt to get her off Bill's trail. And in Twice Upon a Time, he's reunited with Rusty the Good Dalek in the ruins of Villengard. This brings the total number of Dalek appearances in the 12th Doctor's era to 5. And finally, the Daleks have cameoed in 2 13th Doctor stories. In Once Upon Time, Belle hides from Daleks as she manoeuvres through the so-called Dalek sector. And in The Vanquishers, the Dalek war fleet are destroyed by the Flux after falling for a trap laid by the Sontarans. This brings the total number of Dalek appearances in the 13th Doctor's era to 5. So which Doctor's era has the most Dalek appearances, i.e. the most stories in which the Daleks appear? In 5th place, we have the 6th and 7th Doctors, still with just 1 Dalek story each. In 4th place, we have the 4th, 5th and 9th Doctors, that's 2 stories. In 3rd place, we have the 2nd, 3rd and 10th Doctors, at 4 stories. In 2nd place, we have the 12th and 13th Doctors, at 5 stories. And in joint 1st place, we have the 1st and 11th Doctors, with 6 stories each. With a total of 4 cameos, the 11th Doctor's era is, by far, the one with the most. And finally, which Doctor's era has the most Dalek appearances in terms of runtime? I've left this till last because, in some cases, the Daleks' cameo appearances are enough to give one Doctor's era the edge over another that would otherwise have ranked at the same level or even slightly higher. Of course, this count can only be approximate since it doesn't take into account the fact that the Daleks have more scenes in some stories than others. But otherwise, without further ado, in 12th place we have the 6th Doctor with 90 minutes of Dalek runtime. In 11th place, we have the 5th Doctor, with 90 minutes of Dalek runtime, plus 1 cameo. In 10th place, we have the 7th Doctor, with 100 minutes of Dalek runtime. In 9th place, we have the 11th Doctor, with 95 minutes of Dalek runtime, plus 4 cameos. In 8th place, we have the 9th Doctor, with 135 minutes of Dalek runtime. In 7th place, we have the 12th Doctor, with 135 minutes of Dalek runtime, plus 3 cameos. In 6th place, we have the 13th Doctor, with 190 minutes of Dalek runtime, plus 2 cameos. In 5th place, we have the 10th Doctor, with 245 minutes of Dalek runtime, plus 1 cameo. In 4th place, we have the 4th Doctor, with 250 minutes of Dalek runtime. In 3rd place, we have the 2nd Doctor, with 325 minutes of Dalek runtime, plus 2 cameos. In 2nd place, we have the 3rd Doctor, with 350 minutes of Dalek runtime, plus 1 cameo. Which means that once again, in 1st place, we have the 1st Doctor, with a whopping 775 minutes of Dalek runtime, plus 1 cameo. And just for fun, the accumulated runtime of every Dalek story to date is 2,780 minutes. The total number of Dalek stories so far is 27, and the total number of Dalek appearances, or stories in which the Daleks have appeared, is 42, aka the answer to life, the universe, and everything. So there we have it. The 1st Doctor is, by all accounts, the one that has fought the Daleks the most. His record of 5 Dalek stories remains unbeaten, though if we include Dalek cameos, the 11th Doctor just manages to edge in alongside him. It's hardly surprising that the show's earliest years, the height of Dalek mania, feature the highest number of Dalek appearances. Nor is the similar trend that pervades the 11th and 12th Doctor's eras, given that they bookend the show's 50th anniversary. Personally, I do think it's slightly surprising just how few Dalek stories there are at certain points in Doctor Who's history. The 4th Doctor's era, for example, has just 2, and the whole of the next decade, the 80s, only 3. It also hammers home how few Dalek stories the 11th and 12th Doctors got, the majority of Dalek appearances in those eras, and the Moffat era as a whole, being cameos. But what do you think? Which results surprised you the most? Which Doctors do you think should have had more, or indeed less, Dalek stories? And more generally, which are your favourite Dalek stories and Dalek cameos? Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please give this video a like if you've enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you want to go one step further, you can find the link to my Patreon page in the video description. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.